these are going to be slightly different tutorials in that what we're going to do is cover some practical things around the real life project and really try and show some of the exciting things about MVC and Razor within .NET 4. Okay, so before we start, we need to understand some theory around the usage of MVC, and MVC really revolutionizes software development, especially in terms of divorcing the view, the interface, from the middleware and then from the logic that exists, the data infrastructure that exists around the project. So with this we have our views, and it's the views that will be exposed to the outside. Within these views we then call up our controller in some sort of way. We do some sort of processing and then we'll update the controller again. The model itself is then consistent across both the controller and the view, where we can update the model and pass it back into the view. So let's look at a real life example, and we'll look at all the basic elements of it, such as the usage of combo boxes, tables and so on. So the site we'll have a look at is this one here. So it's been built up over a certain amount of time, and it has things like tests. So let's take an example here. We can see the smoothness of MVC, and we can just select a few little things there, and then eventually we can see, if we go back, we can have explanations inside the program, and we can see here MVC has been able to process our correct and incorrect answers. So there's a whole lot of things in here that we can actually show as examples of using MVC. So as much as possible we'll try and actually show little code snippets as to how to get these things to work. Okay, so let's look around our project. So we have one here, it's named security. And what we'll find within a project is that all the additional libraries that we need are added as references. So in this case we're going to use some encryption, so Bouncy Castle is included, and we should be able to see that there is a DLL associated with that. And then that DLL gets added as a reference when we create our website. Okay, so here we are with our views. So our views are organized in a number of views, and we can see in this case we have account, challenges, coding and so on. Within inside each of these views we can actually see our actual view through the CS/HTML files. So for example, if we look here, if we go into encryption, then within encryption we might see something like this one, which is keys. Okay, so that's a view as in keys. So we can see within encryption we can find our view, and here it is here. So within inside a view we'll actually see our HTML code, the standard HTML, but the other things that are added are things like, in this case, a grid, and so on. If we take an example of another file, such as the diffie one, and we can see what our code actually looks like. Okay, so what we'll do is just to speed things up, we'll now run the web page from the local debugger. And we can see it just starts up. And what we do is we publish the results of this to our website when we're complete. Okay, so it just looks like the external website, but it's obviously running locally on a development server. So with inside our views, there are partial views, and the partial views themselves are then little elements of the overall view that we can use to refresh the whole view without updating the whole page. So let's take an example of this, and we'll take an example in coding. I'll take a simple example here. So we can see here we have our main DBM file. So the first thing that we typically do is that we have an index with inside our view, and then if we want to resolve a link within Razor, we have html.actionLink. This will be the name that appears on the link, and then this is the controller that is actually called. So in this case, we're calling up our DBM one here. Okay, so when we click on this, this will go to this view here. Then with inside this view, we have a partial view, and with inside the partial view, we can actually see we have a number of text boxes within a table, and then we have a number of results coming back. In this case, it's defined as raw, so it doesn't modify any of the characters with inside the return values, because we might have characters such as ampersands and so on. So what will happen here is that when we create with inside the index file, when the user clicks on this one, it then calls up the controller. So if we look at the controller, and in this case we're in the coding controller, and then we'll search for DBM. Here we are. So this is our DBM action. Okay, so the user clicks on the DBM link, it will then call up the DBM view. So there are normally two methods in here. One is for HTTPGet, and HTTPGet is called by default, and that is when a page is asked for with the GET. So that's a simple URL access to the page. When we're in the page, we might post from a form. With this, we post all the details of the controls and what are contained inside them with an HTTP post, so it's much more complex. So just to recap, when we call up the page itself, it's an HTTPGet. If we call up by clicking on a button with inside the page, it's an HTTPpost. So initially, when we just click on the link, this will get us set up. So we're doing some calculations here. And now what we're doing is setting our view data. and we return back to the view. So the view will actually show the whole of the page. So let's see what that looks like. And there it is. So just some code in there. You can see that it will update that, and it'll also update this. Okay, so that will have taken the values, that will have updated these values here on the form. Go back to the controller again. MW, DBW, and DBM. So the first thing we should notice is that inside the view there is an AJAX begin form and an end form. And inside this, anything that is an input with an input tag, such as for a button or a hyperlink, will cause the form to be posted back to the controller. So inside here, we can see here that we have 3 submit buttons. Calculate MW, calculate DBW, calculate DBM. One's called button 1, one's called button 2, one's called button 3. So hopefully what should happen is that when we go to here, we can see button 1, button 2 and button 3. So what we'll do is we'll run the code. We'll click on the button and we'll just prove that we move into the HTTPpost action. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so that would have caused a get to happen. So this part here would have been called, and you can see already it's got some values already pre-populated, and that was because of this code here. Now what we'll do is we'll just change one of the values, and then we'll do a calculation. Okay, so what happened there is that it has called up the HTTP post in this time. So you can see there that we clicked on the second button. So the second button is now coming through. The other buttons are coming through as a null, but only that one is a null. So we'll step through the program. So what's going to happen here is that it's going to take the value from the form. Okay, so let's have a look. So it takes these values, MW, DBW, from the text box. There we go. Puts it into a double, converts it into a double. Then we can see here that that's a null, so it won't do that, and that isn't a null. So then it will go into here. We can look at all our values if we want. So there's these values have been set. So then move all the way around there. That's a null, so it won't set it. It'll come down to here. Hopefully these values are now set. Then from here we can then show those values onto the text boxes as we have here. We'll just get rid of our breakpoints. And there we go, so it's been updated. Okay, so just to prove that it works with other values, we can change any of these ones, and it's triggering the different values and causing a different HTTP post to actually happen. Okay, so that shows an example of using the partial views, using the links. And the one thing to notice is that we're using Ajax here. So with Ajax, when a post happens, it will go and update only the partial view. So in this case, only the code in here will be updated. So the user doesn't actually see the page refreshing. They will only see the small part of the view being updated. Okay, so if you want to have a look at, often what you have to do is look at the HTML code that's created in case there's any problems with it. And there you go. So that's what the code actually looks like once the Razor engine has actually updated it. So one thing you should be able to notice is that all the details of links and so on have been resolved. And then the extra little code that's required to run the program is actually in there.